started soon and
Great.
getting us on Facebook. Because we always have a few people that join us on Facebook from different places and well, sometimes not too far away actually, but Facebook does give us a chance to get people who either don't want to be or can't be with us in person. So we're going to put that up there again. And here we go, guys. Let's put it up on Temple Beth Ami's Facebook page.
Perfect.
You get to see all the magic as it happens. Okay.
I love it.
Oh, and here we got Gordon and Elise coming in. So, well, it's only 7:05, 7:06. So we gave everyone a chance to come on in and get out of the heat. It is considerably cooler here for me than it is at home. So I like, yeah, but it doesn't. It's so bad. So yeah, I'm not going to complain anymore. I've already complained every day. So yeah, I don't like it. But listen, our ancestors right now are in the wilderness and they have no air conditioning. They set out, it says right here, they get to sit by the springs of water here that they got. And you can see that sometimes they have water right there. And sometimes, as we read, Moses has to do a little magic to get the water for people. But of course, we see them complaining already. We've seen them already in the same chapter that we read about, the chapter 15. They're coming through the Sea of Reeds, and then already they come out a few days. They don't have water, and they are complaining. They complained against Moses, and it's already started. So then we also read about how they didn't like the food, right? They didn't like the food on this trip either. So all I can tell you is that I have the same issue that I think about all the time, especially folks, when we have, like we do, well, not just Passover, but when we do a trip to Israel, I get, what kind of food are we going to have on the trip? And let's just put it this way. It becomes an issue for people. Where are we going to eat? When do we eat? Are we? The food is good in Israel. I do too, but
it was wonderful.
Some people grumble, and I feel like Moses. And I say, what am I going to do, God? And then, of course, I can't give people manna. I can't give them this great food from the sky. I don't know if you'd want it either. And they got quail, right? They also got what's called the Slav, which sounds like a slob, but it's the Slav. Yeah, they got this quail. They got the Slav, which I said is like, it's at least it's meat, right? So they got that. So these were miracles that they got. And of course, as we read, there's a rule, which is that on Friday, you have to gather it together, and you have to gather it because on Saturday you don't gather it. It's Shabbat. And this is actually how the people learn about Shabbat. Because normally when they gather together and they try to save some, put in a little doggy bag, it gets infested with maggots and stinks, but not on the sixth day. On the sixth day, on Friday, they gather it together, they keep it, they use it, and it doesn't turn foul, and there are no maggots in it. So the manna is a miracle on its own. It's already a miracle that it's there every day, and people get whatever they need. And some people say it tastes like anything you want. They never have to buy it. They don't have to scrounge for it. They literally just go pick it up. They don't have to kill anything. They gather it together. But the other miracle is that on Shabbat, they have a double portion on Friday so that they don't have to do anything. And this is really how they learn about Shabbat. So Shabbat, we learn about Shabbat through manna. And we actually have a little remnant of this tradition on Shabbat. Some people follow it, some people don't. But some people have 2 challahs on Shabbos.
Really?
You've seen that before? They hold 2 challahs on Shabbos. And the reason is to remember the double portion of manna that we gathered on Friday. So it's almost like saying, here's our double portion of manna. So we still remember manna on Shabbos, even today. That's why some people get 2 little challahs rather than 1 big challah. They call them kiddush challahs, but some people buy those. So, and so that's how they learned about Shabbos, through manna. This is really the first time, even before they get the law and the 10 commandments, which they're about to get, we'll read next week. They learn about it through manna. So this is what we finished with. We learned about the fact that even a little bit of that manna is kept inside the ark, inside the Raiders of the Lost Ark. That box had a little bit of manna in it. It was in a jar. It says a jar here, and they kept it. So they had a little bit of leftover manna. I don't know what happened to that manna. I don't know if that turned bad, but I don't know. Now it does say that this was Moses's idea. It says Moses said to Aaron. It doesn't say God said to do it, but it does say here it says Adonai had commanded Moses. So yeah, here no, it says that God. This is what Adonai has commanded. So it's Moses says it. We don't hear God saying it, but Moses says he heard it. He heard that God said to do it. So anyways, they kept it. And that's what we finished with, chapter 16. All right. So a couple miracles we read about last week. One's really famous, crossing the Sea of Reeds, becoming free people, singing the song in chapter 15. Reading, we read about in 14. Miriam singing the song, right? And then we read about the manna, which compared to the crossing of the Sea of Reeds isn't as big, but it was, if you think about it, a lot longer. It lasted for 40 years. So in the scheme of what was an important miracle, manna was pretty important. So we obviously think about the crossing of the Red Sea a lot more, but the manna was a miracle too. So as we pick up now, the people are in the wilderness of Sin, of near Sinai, Midbar Sin. And it says the whole Israelite community continued by stages as Adonai would command. They camped at Rephidim, and there was no water for the people to drink. So here again, you see, they get to a place, there's no water. So you know what they did last time they didn't have water is that they got mad. The people quarreled with Moses, give us water to drink. They said, so they said. And Moses replied to them, why do you quarrel with me? Why do you try Adonai? And again, he's not saying go bother God. He's actually saying you're quarreling with me and you're trying God. So it's not like 2 different things. And it's not like he's saying go bother God. He's saying, why are you bothering God? Your quarreling with me is essentially the same as quarreling with God. But the people thirsted there for water, and the people grumbled against Moses and said, why did you bring us up from Egypt? To kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst? And so here you have that same refrain, not just give us water, but you brought us out here to die. So, this isn't the first time we've heard it. They said it immediately after they left Egypt, even before they got to the Sea of Reeds. Okay, so the people have no water, right? So the answer, so on the face of it, these people are just behaving the way any person would behave, you'd think, if they didn't have water. Now, part of this is a problem because it doesn't say where they would have gotten water from, right? Doesn't say, well, all they had to do was pray or whatever they had to do. It doesn't say. It just says that they were upset that they didn't have water. Now, look, there's either something missing or there's something implied that, again, the rabbis picked up on, which was, well, I'll show you.
We do know they've been complaining all along,
So let's look at what Rashi. Oh, that's actually similar to what one said before. So one of the things that Ibn Ezra says, and actually I think there's a Rashi. No, that's the same. That's the one. The Ibn Ezra comment was not this one. This one actually says the people, this commentary says, this says some of the people, not all the people. It says the people. It doesn't say kol ha'am, it says vayarav ha'am. So it's not all the people. So here it says, maybe some people were upset with Moses on it. This one is oh, this one's kind of actually similar too. This is the other one. The other commentary Ibn Ezra says is they spoke to Moses and Aaron. There was no mention of Aaron. For I've explained already, Moses spoke to Israel. Oh, sorry. Hold it a second. This one. Let us all cry unto the Lord. He said, wherefore do you try the Lord, to those who wanted to test God? So what Ibn Ezra is saying is they actually, what's missing here is that the people actually weren't just asking for water. They were saying, God, give us water. We don't believe that you'll give us water. Now, what they should have done, the implication of what the sages are saying is they should have had faith that God was going to give them water, not, hey, God, can you give us water now? And that feeling that they had, which was, well, let's see if God can really give us water, or that attitude of saying, oh, God can't give us water. That's what annoys God. That's what annoys Moses, not saying, we're praying for water. God, I hope, please bring us water. But God, you can't give us water here. Why, the way you say it to somebody, which makes a huge difference, is, oh, I don't think, God, you can get us water here, is not the way they should have been talking to God. And it's not so much that they were thirsty. And, Mike's point is they're human beings, they're thirsty, but it's the way they responded. It's the way they said either to Moses or again, essentially the bigger issue is they're trying God. The key here isn't just that they strove with Moses. The word here is that, you're quarreling with me. It's trivun is the word in Hebrew. Why are you arguing with me? Why are you striving with me, quarreling with me? But here, why do you test God? And so however they're saying it, Moses interprets it, and the Torah is kind of saying it, and the commentators are saying it's not that they just didn't think that they had water, it's that they literally said to God, God, you can't give us water here. And I guess that's kind of that's also this commentary here with Rashi, which is, will he be able to give us water in an arid land? Like, God can't do that. It's just an attitude that they had. And I guess you could say it's a part of their attitude. It's part of their attitude. And it's part of this comment, which is, it's part of this, why did you bring us from Egypt to kill us?
Well, when they set off for Egypt, it's almost like they didn't trust Moses. Yeah. And the first thing they do, they don't have food. And then, they get food, it's not what they want, but they get, then the next thing is they don't have water. So it's like, what are you doing now?
But it's not simply, God, we want water. It's because that's the response that somebody who's dependent on God in the middle of the desert would say, which is your point. They're dependent on God. They have no water. What should they do? The answer is not, hey, God, did you bring us out here to kill us?
Right, no, I agree.
That's the difference. So it's the attitude. It's more of the attitude that they took
But I
with
don't
God,
think they're a believer in God.
which is astounding given the fact that God just made the sea part for them a couple of days before. The sea literally got split open. And on top of that, there's a pillar of fire and a pillar of cloud in front of them all the time, which is a miracle in itself. So every day. So it's that issue of what do? They don't just go, hey, God, we really need water, but God, did you bring us out here to die? Or what the commentator said, they also were saying, which is, God, you can't bring us water here. So what did you bring us out here for, God? Clearly you're killing us out here, which makes no sense. But that's the way people respond. I mean, people actually say this kind of garbage. Look, I will just throw this out hypothetically. You know, the Dodgers won 92 games and Mike's like, they lost yesterday. You know, Mike, they lost to the Giants. One game. I was upset too, but you can't be mad at them for losing. You were mad at them. We talked about it. You were mad at them. Look, I was mad because I was actually at the game. It was 104 degrees. So he took out the whole team. So, but look, he's got to rest them. But we're like that. Human beings are like, what have you done for me lately? And we forget the miracles that are around us. It's that famous, but it's correct, but it's human nature. That's the famous story of the woman whose son, she's walking with him on the beach and the wave comes and takes him out to sea and she prays and says, God, please bring me my son back, right? Please, and of course, then the wave comes back and answers her prayer and brings her the kid back. And then she says to God, well, he had a hat. So that's the Jewish joke. It really works if you're Jewish. It's not a funny, you can't really tell it in church, by the way. You can't. I mean, maybe you could, but it works much better in synagogue. But it's where he had a hat. But so the fact that they would say this in the presence of God's miracles is again insane, because they say, did you bring us up here to kill us and our children and our livestock, by the way? Well, don't forget the livestock with thirst. So Moses cried out to God saying, what shall I do with this people? Before long, they will be stoning me. So he turns to God and he says, look, they're going to kill me. That's what he said. They will kill me. And Adonai said to Moses, pass before the people, take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take along the rock with which you struck the Nile and set out. I will be standing there before you at the rock of Horeb. Strike the rock and water will issue from it, and the people will drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. Now here it says you can see it quite clearly, and it's very important, strike the rock and water will issue from it, and the people will drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. So God said, I'll be with you at the rock at Horeb, which is, by the way, another name for Mount Sinai. So did this miracle actually happen at Mount Sinai? At least according to this text, it did. And this is the story of Moses striking a rock and water coming out. You got to remember that for later. That's right. Because in the book of Numbers, Moses does the exact same thing, and he's punished by not being able to ever come into the land of Israel. And what's so striking about it is it seems like it's the same story, but it has a very different outcome. Now, some people point out that story in Numbers, it says specifically that God told him to speak to the rock, and he struck it instead, which is not following directions. Yeah, Maya. Well, that's an interesting interpretation, but that's not what the Torah says. So there's a lot of interpretations of why Moses really didn't get into the land. But so Maya said it's because he killed the Egyptian in the first place. Yeah, but in the Prince of Egypt, he kills the guy, but they never get to Egypt in that one. They don't get to, the land of Israel. That movie ends at the movie actually doesn't even end at Mount Sinai. It does end at Mount Sinai, but he doesn't say anything at Mount Sinai. It skips ahead. It just has him walking down with the 10 Commandments, which is weird because they could have ended it. They really end it with them leaving Egypt. We showed that scene, by the way, Maya. Everybody remembers. We saw that scene when we read the story of it. We did, and that's almost one of the last scenes of the movie. But the very last scene is a shot over Moses' shoulder as he's coming down with the Ten Commandments. So they did include that. In the movie, The 10 Commandments, the most dramatic scene is the crossing of the Sea of Reeds. It's what you see at the Universal Studio Tour. But it actually, of course, it's called the 10 Commandments, and also doesn't even end there. It ends later on, right? They go all the way to the book of Numbers in that, because they have the Korach rebellion in that too. But so Prince of Egypt doesn't go as far into the history as 10 Commandments does. But for all the movies, they skip over this. All the movies skip over these scenes because these scenes are very problematic because they show the Israelites in a very, very bad way. The Torah doesn't skip over it. The Torah has it every blow by blow. So, but importantly, we remember this story because Moses will revisit this scene and it's a very different outcome. And it seems like when you consider the fact, so some people say it's, ridiculous that Moses didn't get to come into the promised land because he struck a rock, because God didn't tell him to, right? But it's even more insane when you think about the fact that at one point God did tell him to strike a rock. So all he did was just go, oh, I guess it's the rock hitting thing, which, by the way, he's 120 years old at that point. That's 40 years after this. He's 120. Okay, so yeah, he's mad. He could be mad here too. But at least, the argument is he doesn't follow directions the second time. But you're right. Oh no, he was angry. That's angry, absolutely. Listen, he hit the rock and he wasn't supposed to hit the rock. But the bigger issue that Doreen is mentioning is that he actually says to the people, you are a rebellious group of people. And here he doesn't say that. He doesn't say anything to the people. Now, there was one stream of commentary on this interpretation, which says that Moses's real problem was the fact that in this scene, he's scared of the people. In the other scene, he's not scared of the people. He's just mad at the people. And he curses them. And at that moment, the commentators say, God says to him, you don't talk to my kids that way. I can talk to my kids that way. You can't talk to my kids that way. But it's a very wonderful midrash, because that is the midrash, right? Because if you can tell your kids what to do, but man, somebody in the grocery store tells your kids what to do, you flip out. Like, well, you don't talk to my kids. You don't discipline my kids. So it's very protective of that. In that scene, I think, is a very interesting midrash, because God gets very protective of the people and says, God says to Moses, you don't have a right to talk to them like that. They're not your people. You're their leader, and I've put you as the person in charge, but you're not their parent, and you don't have a right to condemn them or to call them something. So it's an interesting scene, because it's one of the commentaries on it that I think is really powerful, which is it's not Moses hitting the rock. It's that his temper, and that it's his whole demeanor, and it says where his mind is. And the interesting thing about it that people also forget is that's another generation. And Moses was sick and tired of it maybe by that point, because not only did he have one generation that gave him grief, but now the next generation's giving him grief. So it's very easy for him to say, I'm sick and tired of this. I dealt with this with your parents, and now, yes, he's an older dude. He was an older dude here. He's 80 years old here. What? Yes. But he expects more from them. And he could say, I put up with your parents who were slaves, who didn't know any better, who were in the slave mindset, 80, when I was 80 years old, 40 years ago, I put up with it. I'm not putting up with it anymore. So you can understand it. I mean, I understand it. But you see the dynamic here, which is if you don't remember this scene, the other scene isn't as powerful. If you just read that scene, you go, oh, Moses lost his temper. But it's not so simple, because it's also this scene from before. And Moses is in the same place to some extent. He's in the same moment. And when you think about that, then you really think about, well, maybe Moses is done. Moses is he just can't do anymore. And then, of course, Moses is very sad because he doesn't get to come in. Remember, the Torah says that he's not happy about that punishment. But the Midrash, we read the Midrash. The Midrash goes on and on and on for pages and pages of Midrash with Moses begging God, please let me in. Let me go in disguise. I don't even have to be Moses. I'll go in as a bird. I'll go in as anything. Just let me go in. I don't have to, no one has to even know I'm there. God says, you're not doing it. So Moses is crushed that he can't come in. But the rabbis don't let it go, which is good because they understand how hard it must have been for Moses not to be able to finish that job.
God let him see.
Yeah, well, that's not a midrash. That's actually in the Torah that he gets to see it. But for him, that's his kind of reward that God gives him, is that ability to see it. He gets to see everything. That's the midrash, is they got to see what it would look like in the future. But not even that, because it says he got to see the whole land of Israel. And so the midrash is that he got to see the land of Israel for thousands of years, what would go on there. Anyways, the point is that this is a really, he saw me at the wall a couple of weeks ago. I hope he was happy, but I hope he didn't get mad. But here, Moses does what he's told. That's all it says. He does what he's told. And the place was named Massah and Meribah. And if you look at the words, trial and quarrel. Not good names for these places, Massah and Meribah. Because the Israelites quarreled and because Adonai, they tried Adonai. Yep. So Massah and Meribah would be by there. So a reeve is like a quarrel, an argument. And a Massah is, again, similar to the word nes or what we had before, which is trial. Those words. Interestingly enough, those words, we go back here, are the same words in different forms here. Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test me? Why do you try me? Right there, the word nasun, tenasun. So the word Massah and Meribah are the versions of those two words, trivun and nasun. So they're both there. Trial and quarrel.
Is that totally different word?
Yeah. So Matsada at its root has the word for fortress or fort or tower as the root. So that's what Matsada, because there are other Matsadas. All right. And here's the next line right here. Is Adonai present among us or not? Right? Which is not exactly what they said, but it's kind of a way of saying it. They were questioning whether God was there with them. All right. Now the next line says, and Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. Now that's the next line. Literally the next line. There's nothing there. It says, this is the next thing. So is it two different places? Difficult to know, because right here they come to Rephidim and it says there was no water for the people to drink. So it is possible. It is possible that right here the people came and they encamped at Rephidim. It could be that the text actually ends here. And then another writer says there was no water for Ein Mayim Lishtot Ha'am. So if they encamped at Rephidim, and then the next line picks up right here, and Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim, it's probably the way it originally existed in one text. Because right here it says there are Massah and Meribah. I don't want to get into it other than, again, probably as two different authors, but because there's a different place here. Now, it could be that Rephidim was also known as Massah and Meribah. It's possible. It is possible. But this is a story about them not having water, and this is a story of the Amalekites attacking us. Let's look at the Amalekite story attacking us, because these two stories are here together. And the rabbis interpreted, and maybe you could say it's pretty clear, that the reason that the Amalekites attacked us was as punishment for us complaining about water. The only problem is this is like the third time we've already complained about water since we've left. So it didn't necessarily have to happen here, but it does happen here, where it happens in this text, where this text is here. But now the Amalekites come and attack us. Now, one quick discussion about the Amalekites. We've mentioned them before. They've popped up before. The Amalekites are first mentioned, or Amalek is first mentioned way back in Genesis. It says that Amalek is a descendant of Esau. He's Esau's grandson. So he's somewhat related to us. Somewhat related to us. The Amalekites in the Bible are always our enemy. There's never a good Amalekite. And the reason I say that is because sometimes there's good Ammonites. Sometimes there's good Moabites. Ruth is a Moabite, right? Sometimes there's good Canaanites, right? There's Tamar, Judah's daughter-in-law / wife, is baby mama, whatever you want to say. She's a Canaanite. There are other, well, there's not usually too many good Philistines, but no. But Amalekites, we're not only allowed to kill, we're commanded to kill. There are no good Amalekites in the Bible, and they attack us. Correct. I killed him because he was Amalek. The problem is we don't know anything about the Amalekites historically. There is no historical record about the Amalekites. The Egyptians don't write about them. The Syrians don't write about them. The Ammonites don't. We don't know who they are from any other source. The only source there is about them is in the Bible. Now, I will say there are other countries or other peoples mentioned in the Bible that we're not exactly sure who they are. Somebody in the Bible knew who they were, but we don't have other records from them. We think maybe they're, let's say there's just another, like, I'll give you an example, like Ashkenaz in the Bible is mentioned. Now, we now say that we said 1,000 years ago it was Germany. Definitely wasn't Germany. We think Ashkenaz in the Bible was Scythia, because it's kind of like the word Scythia, which would have meant it would have been modern day Russia, Kazakhstan, that kind of area, the Central Asia area. Maybe around the, maybe around the Caucasus. Okay. But we know that that's not where it is. We don't know exactly where it is, but we can say maybe these people. We don't have any reference to who Amalek is. There is no archaeological site that we can look at and say that's Amalekite. We've never found a record that they've left. They're gone, completely gone. But what's weird about them is they are mentioned so many times in the Bible, and in this story, they have a prominent role. They're mentioned in other places, especially in the book of Judges and the book of Samuel. We read about Saul is commanded to wipe out the Amalekites, and he leaves one alive. We don't know really, like, exactly where their capital was. We don't know what their structure was like. They seem to be, based on the Bible's description, they seem to be desert nomads, raiders, like Bedouins. We think that they are like a people that kind of just raided other people based
Mark,
on the text.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
My Bible has a footnote. It says the Amalekites are a tribal people living in the Negev and in the Sinai Peninsula.
Yeah. That's based only on the Torah. So the problem is, based on where they attack us, that's where they lived. Based on where they're described in the book of Samuel, that's where they are. The problem was we don't have any evidence for their existence. So the Bible commands us later on in the book of Deuteronomy to wipe them out wherever they are. It's a commandment. It's a mitzvah. It's literally a commandment. So as I've said before many times, if an Amalekite came in here right now, I have a mitzvah to kill that person. It's literally a commandment to annihilate them, to wipe them out. I don't have a choice. I literally would say, I had a mitzvah to kill this person. It was a mitzvah, the same as any other mitzvah in the Torah. I have a mitzvah to kill an Amalekite. It seems as though the Amalekites were completely wiped out. If not by us, then by somebody else. There is no record of them. The only people who keep a record of them are us. Now, today, we're going to see why they are such a problem. But understand, I took a class in rabbinical school about Amalek. It was a quarter-long class, and all we did was read about Amalek. That's all we did. That's all the teacher came in. Now, how could a teacher come in and teach Amalek? How? Because there's so much written about Amalek, because it's not just in the Torah, it's in the rabbinic sources, it's in the Midrash, it's in every, and all the commentaries from Rashi to Rambam, there's texts about the Amalekites. Because even long after they were gone, there's a lesson from them. And then there's this question of, is it more than these one group of Bedouin people, raiders that lived in the Negev and Sinai? Is Amalek a spiritual thing? Is Amalek, was Hitler Amalek? And there are people who literally say, yes, anybody who picks up the banner of destroying the Jewish people are Amalek. So, of course, then the modern interpretations that you'll hear in the Orthodox world today in Israel are their Palestinian groups. Is Hezbollah Amalek in Lebanon, right? Or the Hezbollah forces Amalek? Is anybody who claims that their mission is to destroy Israel or the Jewish people, are they Amalek? Do they identify themselves by that way as being Amalekites? So there are rabbinic teachings right now that have been written in the last 10, 15, 5 years that says, yes, anybody who identifies themselves as on a mission to destroy the Jewish people, Nazis, white supremacists, whatever they are, they're Amalek. And we have a mitzvah to destroy them before they destroy us. So this is a very relevant issue, because Amalek will be invoked and is still being invoked to this very day. So the most famous one in the Bible, besides the Amalekites, because the Bible identifies them as an Agagite, is Haman. So Haman is identified as an Amalekite, even though he lived in Persia literally 1,000 years after this was written. So is he literally a descendant of Amalek? Was he in the bloodline? Well, the rabbi said he was, but there are other rabbis who say it doesn't matter whether he was actually Amalekite by birth, because he was destroying the Jews, because he wanted to kill the Jews, that made him an Amalekite. So I will show you one thing that was
Well, does that make Hitler an Amalekite?
yeah.
Oh,
That's what I'm saying. So people would look for, let me show you. It was called hold it, I'll show you the name of the movie. It was called, it was a movie about Esther. And in the movie, it was an Esther movie. And in the movie, they basically had Haman, when he was, they had banners for Haman that were literally like swastikas. And they didn't make it a swastika, but they kind of like twisted it in a way. The movie was called it was called In the Court of the King or something. It was not a Jewish, let me just see what the name of it was, but it was made a few years ago. They did a movie with Esther where F. Murray Abraham was Haman. That was pretty good. That was a pretty good one. It's called One Night with the King. One Night with the King. And I think that was the one because, it was called One Night with the King. I think this was the one because in the F. Murray Abraham one, he played Mordecai, and Jürgen Prochnow played Haman, and he's always a bad guy. But this one was called One Night with the King. I wouldn't say it was a great movie, but what I thought was weird was that they used, I wouldn't say it was a bad decision, but they used this kind of imagery of swastikas in depicting it, which you'd say would be a modern midrash of how the, I can't find, of how the Nazis were inheritors of that kind of anti-Semitism. But let's take a look at why Amalek is so bad. Oh, I do want to show you. I do want to show you one thing. Well, actually, let's read it first, and then I'll go back and show it to you. All right, so it says Amalek comes at us at Rephidim, and Moses said to Joshua, "Pick some troops for us to go out and do battle with Amalek. Tomorrow I will station myself at the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand." I don't like the word rod of God, but I'm sure the King James has a better translation for rod of God, but what does it say? Does it? Oh, come on. Anyways, it's the mateh, it's the staff of God, but whatever. Sounds bad in English, the rod of God. And anyways, Joshua did as Moses told him, and he fought with Amalek while Moses, Aaron, and Hur were on the top of the hill. Then, whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed. But whenever he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. So he's holding up his hands, and as long as he's holding up his hands, and again, the choreography of this is that he's got Moses is in the middle, and Aaron and Hur was from the tribe of Judah. They're holding up his hands while Joshua is fighting as a soldier, as a general, whatever, but Moses is there with his people, Aaron and Hur, and they're holding up his hands. But Moses' hands grew heavy, and so he took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it while Aaron and Hur, one on each side, supported his hands. And thus his hands remained steady until the sun set. So could keep his hands up all the time. He needed to sit down, and they held up his hands. But that's a pretty tough thing to do if you're in your 80s. Any age, you have to hold up your hands like this all the time. Your hands are going to get tired. I challenge you to do that for very long. It's not a fun thing to do. It's not so easy if they're up a whole time. But whenever he lets his hands down, the people start losing. So there's lives depending on this. So Joshua overwhelmed the people of Amalek with the sword. Not sure what Amalek and his people, yeah. With the sword, yeah. They attacked him. They killed him, yeah. He killed him with. Yeah. But they literally fought hand-to-hand combat. Well, it's not really that word, because lefi chorev means literally with the edge of the sword. What's the King James? Yeah, I like the edge of the sword better. So lefi chorev is, and this is an interesting. I'll just share with you a little weird Hebrew thing. Fi chorev literally means the mouth of the sword. And we don't say the mouth of the sword anymore, say the edge of the sword, but it's the same kind of thing, which is like, it's when you say the edge of the sword, it's more of a poetic way of saying it, but that's what the word is in Hebrew. The phrase is in Hebrew, with the mouth of the sword. But the edge of the sword would be the better translation. So this is just an example of a more literal translation. So Adonai said to Moses, inscribe this as a document, as a reminder, and read it out loud to Joshua. I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Let's just, before we move on. I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. No one will ever know who these people are. Now, what's interesting is that is true. There is no record of Amalek anywhere else. The Egyptians don't talk about them, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Persians, nobody talks about them. They don't exist. We would have no knowledge there was ever a people of Amalek unless it was in the Torah. So here's the weird thing. We remember people who no one else would remember. because of what they did to us. So we're the only people who remember these people. Now, here's an interesting thing to think about. The Jewish people are the repository of memory, of a historical memory that goes back thousands of years and remembers people who otherwise, according to this, would long ago have been forgotten, wouldn't have known about them. It's safe to say that most people wouldn't really know who the Moabites were or the Edomites were if it wasn't for the Jewish people. But more importantly, these people are only remembered for the evil, for the bad things that they did. And we're the only people that remember them. So, I mean, you could take from this the lesson that there are things that are part of Jewish history that maybe will be preserved because we'll remember it and no one else will remember it. And it goes not just for good things, but for bad things too. So let's just say, I mean, we have to assume that everything that we have now in history books will be remembered. But let's just say thousands of years from now, will people remember, or how will people remember the Inquisition? I don't know. I mean, we're assuming the Catholic Church will be here thousands and thousands of years. No, well, that's fair. It's safe to say there's a billion Catholics, so safe to say that there will be. But 3,000 years ago, let's say for sure 2,000 years ago, if somebody would have asked you who's going to be more powerful, the Egyptian dynasty of Ramses or the Jewish people, no one would have said the Jewish people. You know, 2,000 years ago, if somebody had said, there's a whole lot of people that are Zoroastrian, there's not a lot of Jews, no one would have bet on the Jews.
Right.
There's about 100,000 Zoroastrians that live in India today, and about the only Zoroastrian you've ever heard of is Freddie Mercury. There's not many other Zoroastrians, maybe Zubin Mehta are the only two Zoroastrians you've ever heard of. But 2,000 years ago, no one would have bet on the fact that the Jewish people would still be talked about. So you never know. And I'm not saying people won't remember the Catholic Church 2,000 years from now, but I will tell you who will. The Jewish people will. Jewish people are not going to forget the Inquisition. So it's interesting to think about what is preserved in Jewish history and by the Jewish people that have been forgotten by other people, including really, really bad things. This one for sure is, because God did this. God literally, some history did it, and whoever did it, there is no memory of Amalek except for us. So the tradition we have is that when we start writing, I don't do it, but when a scribe who's writing a Torah scroll sets out in the morning to do his scribal duties with a feather, a quill, and ink, the first thing he does to get his ink rolling on his quill is he'll dip his quill in the ink and he'll write out the word Amalek and then cross it out and reenact this every day that they write.
Wow.
Because that's the way they get their ink going. Because they don't want to write a holy word out. They don't want to write a good word out. So they write out a bad word. And they not only write a bad word, is inscribe this in a document as a reminder. And so literally when it says the word ketov, write it down. Hey, you write it down. I wrote it down and then I crossed it out. So I did exactly what God does. I blot out the name of Amalek. I blotted it out. Some people write the word Amalek on their shoe, especially during Purim. Some people write Amalek out when they want to talk about their enemies, and it's not a good thing when they sometimes talk about their enemies being Amalek, because sometimes they're making disparaging comments about people who are not like Amalek. So we see that sometimes when people make comparisons to Nazis today, that there are still people in the Jewish world who will say somebody is Amalek, and you'd say, that's not a very nice thing to say. Look, it gets to be a big issue if you say Palestinians are Amalek. All Palestinians? Hamas? Groups like Hezbollah? Anyways, this is not the end of the story. Moses built an altar and named it Adonai Nisi, which is, if you notice, Adonai is my banner. It could also be, what's the translation in the King James? They didn't even translate it. They just said Adonai Nisi, right? They didn't translate it. It also could be Adonai is tested with the word Nisi there. He said it means upon the throne of Adonai, Adonai will be at war with Amalek throughout the ages. Milchama Adonai ba'Amalek Medor Vador, right? Medor Lador. Medor Dor, as it says here, generation to generation. What's the King James on that? Yeah, from generation to generation is a little bit what I'd like to see, but through the ages is fine too. Which means that even if Amalek is destroyed in our lifetime or their lifetime, there's always going to be an Amalek. So this seems to lend itself to this idea that Amalek is a spiritual thing. It's not just one group. So why is this such an issue? There are other people that fight with us. There's other people that go to war with us. The Philistines fight with us. The Edomites fight with us. The Arameans fight. Everybody, the Egyptians fight with us. Why this? Why these people? Why are these people so bad? So that's a possibility, as Mike just said. Very easy answer. They're the first. So they're the first. So we just became a people. We're not a people until we leave Egypt, right? Or we were people in Egypt, but now we're a people. But you could say the Egyptians maybe were the first people that persecuted us as a people, but these are the first people that go to war against us, right? They're the first people that actually attack us as a people. The Egyptians kind of attacked us while we were living in their midst. This is a war. So yeah, they're the first, or at least they're the first that attacked us once we were free. And to build on that, the commentary is that they attacked us at a time when nobody in their right mind should have attacked us. How did anybody have the audacity to attack us when everybody knows what we just did to the Egyptians? So God just spent the last 15 chapters destroying the Egyptians in a horrendous way. And the Egyptians are the Egyptians. They're the most powerful country on the face of the earth. The Egyptians?
Well, but somehow it didn't translate because of what they did for what the Jews did for the Egyptians when he saved them, the crops and all that stuff. And this is why they gave more parcel of land.
So,
and stuff.
yes. So Doreen's point is that the Egyptians were not always bad, and not every Egyptian was bad. That is correct. Now, that's why the Egyptians are, you would say, and by the way, the Torah actually says that the Egyptians are eventually allowed, like when the Torah says these groups you can't come into your community, the Egyptians, it says, can come into your community after 4 generations, 3 or 4 generations. They can come into the community. So the Egyptians, and it says, because they were good to you in Egypt for a time. So yeah, we give them some credit. Maya, you were going to say something. The Egyptians, right, are not as problematic for whatever reason as Amalek. That's for sure. But the rabbis say, this is why what Amalek did was so bad, is that God had spent all this time developing this credibility, this reputation for Israel, and then Amalek destroys it in an instant. All the reputation that Israel should have had of people saying, you can't go to war against Israel, look what they just did to the Egyptians, is gone. Because this little tiny Bedouin group of people just had the audacity to attack us, because they can be attacked. They're vulnerable. So God just said, look, all my hard work just went out the window because of Amalek. Because now people are going to say, oh, we can attack Israel too. Amalek did it. So this is the problem. Amalek just did this. Now, God is clearly upset here, right? God says, I will be at war with these people forever. And I will show you this commentary, or this, not this commentary, this other part of the Torah that I keep referencing. So. Wait, hold a second. I'll show you two things. So. Gotta get to it. Where is it? No, for a second. Okay. So here's here it says right here, right? It's right here. You shall not abhor an Edomite, for he is such your kin. You shall not abhor an Egyptian, for you are a stranger in that land. Children born to them may be admitted to your congregation of Adonai in the third generation. And it says right there, the Egyptians can be part of your community. Now, so we do read about other nations. We read about people who who potentially could be a problem for us. But take a look at this too. Hold on a second. Here, I got to make it a little bit larger because I can't see it. Here's 25:17. This is the end of Torah portion Kitei Tzei. So here in Deuteronomy it says, "Remember what Amalek did to you on your journey after you left Egypt. How undeterred by fear of God, he surprised you on the march when you were famished and weary, and cut down all the stragglers in your rear. Therefore, when God grants you safety from all your enemies around you in the land that God is giving you as a hereditary portion, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Do not forget." So here, and again, this is the end of Kitei Tzei. This is the last verse. It's actually it's weird. That's very weird. Oh my gosh. Want to see something weird? Wait, no, what's weird? What am I going to tell Mike? Mike, what am I going to tell him right now? What's the Torah portion we're reading this week?
Oh, yeah.
This week, right there. Kitei Tzei.
Yeah.
I'm not lying. I'll look at my calendar. So that's with this week's portion.
That's weird.
Well, I was thinking about it because I was studying next week's portion, but I'm looking at this. I'm like, wait a second, this is the end of this week's portion. Kitavo is next week's portion. But yeah, this is actually this Maftir that we read tomorrow, this week or whatever. We're reading this now. Wow, that's weird. So this is this week's portion. Let me get this off here. Here, stop looking at my calendar. So hold on a second. I have to show you this again. So the interesting thing about this is the commandment here to destroy them. It says you have to destroy them, right? Or at least blot out their memory. It says God's going to do it, but it says remember what Amalek did to you on the journey, right? And then it finishes with the line. It says lo tishkach, don't forget. So there's actually two commandments: a positive commandment, remember, and the other one, do not forget. So what's interesting about it is it's obviously a pretty important thing. It's kind of phrased two different ways. both as a positive commandment and as a negative commandment. You know, don't forget. So, you know, sometimes we say, remember 9/11. Sometimes we say, don't forget, never forget. So we,
So are those two commandments? Are the 813?
so actually, yeah, it's part of the 613 commandments, part of our, don't give me more commandments, man, I got too many. So it's part of the mitzvot. It's a commandment. It's a mitzvah. That's what I'm saying. It's like written in two different ways. It's written in remember and do not forget, which again, you know, some people point out slightly different actions, right? One of them is actually it's not just a positive language. It's like commanding somebody to remember something is like, you know, when your wife said, or whatever, your husband says, remember to take out whatever, trash. And then they say, don't forget to take out the trash. There's a difference. There's a difference in it. And it's almost as if it's being reinforced, to put it mildly, by God. But it seems pretty important that we don't forget. And here the Torah actually tells us, so this isn't a commentary. This is what the Torah says later on in Deuteronomy, that it says that they surprised you, right? They came and attacked you by surprise, and you were tired, you were famished and weary, and they cut down your stragglers in the rear. So what did they do? They attacked the weakest people, right? And so they didn't just attack the soldiers, they didn't attack the men in the front, they came around the back and attacked the people who were most vulnerable. Yes, you're right, Mike. They were not fighters yet. And everyone was weary. But there's a difference between attacking weary guys and attacking women and children in the back of the van. And that's what they did. And so what they did was reprehensible. So on the face of it, that by itself is pretty bad. But then again, the rabbis say it's also what they did for our reputation. They told everybody for the rest of history, okay, God likes the Israelites. God fights for the Israelites. God does miracles for the Israelites, but they're also vulnerable. So this is the problem, that the Amalekites introduced to some extent that we are vulnerable, that God isn't going to protect us all the time, that somehow maybe if we had left Egypt and we made our way to the land and we conquered the land and we were left alone, that people would just leave us alone. Maybe that's a naive way of looking at it, but that's the way they interpret this.
Are spiritual, they would have been there anyway.
Yeah. It seems as though they are. It seems as though the Amalekites we always have to be on guard for. Which I like that idea, which is that we always have to be on guard. It does. That's a good question. It's a good question, right? The problem here is that we get into a strange theological discussion, which is the other issue, which I was going to share with you, is why did the Amalekites attack us in the first place? Well, it says we're weak, but why are we weak? Well, we didn't have water. Just came out of Egypt. We were slaves. We've been walking a long time. But the rabbis go further, because what just happened? What just happened in that scene? It says right there, they quarreled with God.
Ah,
And so here's the theological conundrum. Were the Amalekites able to attack us because God let us be attacked? So this goes back to this word that's used for this place, which is, we can call it Adonai Nisi, or we can say,
Is anybody else having a hard time seeing the screen?
please let me know if you are.
All I'm seeing is,
no,
Joyce, are you seeing the share screen?
I see two pieces, the
Yeah.
middle one and a small piece on the side. Now I
Oh.
see just the screen.
Yeah, so I
And
closed
now-
down, I closed
Yeah.
that down for a second.
Right.
Yeah,
Um,
I
Even-
can see it.
Yeah, we see it just fine.
Yeah.
all right,
that's
so
fine.
but I'll
I'll-
make it a little bit bigger. So, so
Now we can see.
if this place is called Adonai Nisi, does this also go back to God is being tested?
Mm,
So the word Nisi here is God is tested. The people. It just said right here, right?
mhm.
It said right here that this place that they, yes, and it says right here, this word here, right here. Ma tenasun. So the word Nisi is there too. Why do you try God? And again, the word right here, which is right here. I went too far. Where is it? Right here, Masa and Meribah. The
Mhm.
word Masa has the same root, which is trial. So is this also remembered as a place where God was tried by us and we get punished by having the Amalekites
Ah,
attack us? But,
Didn't pass.
but the theological problem here is, okay, so the Amalekites attack us, but they're doing God's work. They're God's agent in this destruction. Now, this is a problem because we already saw about it in the Egypt. We saw this at the Egyptians. When the Egyptians and especially Pharaoh attack us and hurt us and make us slaves and say, I'm not going to let you go, God says, I'm playing with him, essentially, right? I'm testing him, or I'm hardening his heart so that I can make myself look better in a sense. So we've already seen, like, is Pharaoh just an agent of God's justice? In which case, he's just playing his role. This is a theological issue that exists in the Bible because we have it when the Babylonians destroy the temple, and the rabbinic tradition, and it's even to some extent in the Torah itself, that Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, is just doing God's will. It's a problem because is Nebuchadnezzar, isn't he just doing God's will? I mean, is Nebuchadnezzar a bad guy, or is he just doing what God told him, go destroy my temple? So this is a problem because Nebuchadnezzar in the Bible, you know, he's bad, but he's not like, it's very strange. I've talked about this before. There's a lot of midrash where Nebuchadnezzar is doing God's work. So it's a weird thing. And it gets to kind of like, why do bad things happen in this world? And does God send agents of destruction that are doing his work, but are like, what's their role and what's their responsibility? And are they, I mean, aren't they evil? And I will tell you that this is still discussed and debated because there are people who say that the Nazis, I'm not saying, I mean, I'm offended by it, but there are people who will say that the Nazis were God's punishment on the Jewish people, and they were bad, but they were executing God's justice. I mean, I have a problem with that. I've always had a problem with that. But there are people who say it in the Jewish community.
The Jewish community?
Yeah. Orthodox traditional rabbis who say that God sent the Nazis to punish us for our giving up on the mitzvot, our becoming progressive Jews. That the Nazis came to punish us for, for assimilation. Now, that doesn't make the Nazis good, of course. They're not saying the Nazis are good, but it basically says that God sent them for that role, which is the same thing that Amalek has, which is why they see the Nazis as Amalek, is fulfilling this role that people have throughout the generations to be God's scourge on the Jewish people. I don't like it. I have a problem with that theology, but there are people who that theology works for. It's part of their system. Look, I get offended by it, and there are people who believe it, and there are people who I like and respect, and who I try to be friends with who believe it. But there are people who believe it. There are people who absolutely believe it. Look, there's part of me that really, really doesn't like that. When I hear that, it really makes me mad. But if I got mad at every person who felt that way, there'd be a huge chunk of the Jewish community that I would hate. And I don't want to be filled with that. So I don't think about it that much, but I do have a problem with it. Look, to some extent, the scale of the destruction is almost proof that God must have wanted it to happen. Because it still gets to the question is, why did God let the Amalekites attack us there? Why did God let this happen?
It's the same thing they said about Israel.
Correct. And so this is an ongoing question, and some people feel that the answer is that this is the way God punishes us, and that it doesn't get the Amalek off the hook. It doesn't say, well, the Nazis are just doing God's work, so we don't hate them. It doesn't take away their evil, but there is a way of looking at it so that people will say, that's why they did it, though. That's why only God would allow this kind of thing to happen. Because essentially, if you believe that God is responsible for everything, God has to be responsible for this. And the scale of it is so almost unbelievable that it had to be God's work. Whatever the opposite of a miracle is, that's what they would say it is. We don't have a word for that. We don't have a word for a bad miracle. Supernatural miracle in a bad way, right? Supernatural. Yeah, and that's the cautionary, right? That's the lesson, is that if we're not careful, this will happen again. I can only tell you that when you have that worldview, at least then you can explain why do these things happen, which is that God wanted them to happen. And the fact that Adonai will be at war with Amalek throughout the ages, to some extent, it's almost read as if it's saying God will use Amalek throughout the ages. So I don't know. It is a big issue. Amalek is, like I said, I had a whole course in it. Yeah. Somebody?
Yeah. Kind of thoughts.
Okay.
So if Nazis were on the way, God let it happen because of Jesus. What about today? Choose not only Jews, being religious or going to synagogue or marrying outside the faith. You would think it would happen again right now.
So Mike says, yeah, what about today? Isn't God going to cause another Amalek against us? So the answer for some people who follow this type of logic would be, yeah, the possible destruction of the Jewish people that exists through, let's say, Iran is Amalek. If Iran is successful at nuking Israel, they're Amalek. Now, look, you can make the argument they are Amalek because the current government of Iran has said that they are striving for the destruction of Israel. They've said that. They've said it openly. They've said it every day. They say it publicly. They're not afraid to say it. Iran will say regularly, we want to bring about the destruction of Israel.
Wipe them off the map.
Yeah, wipe you off the map. So when Israel talks about preventing Iran from having nuclear weapons, it's because they don't want Iran to make good on the threat and on their promise. So, my feeling has always been take people at their word. People say they're going to attack you. Don't say, well, I think they're lying. You take them at their word. I believe you. Okay, I believe you, Iran. You want to attack us. And so we're going to stop you from attacking us. So that's what Israel's been doing for the last 30 years.
Yes,
Done everything they could to stop Iran from having a nuclear weapon, including blowing up their nuclear scientists, including blowing up with American cooperation, one of their reactors with a virus, with a computer virus. So we took them at their word. And we're trying to stop our government now from entering another pact with Iran that would allow them to hasten their nuclear capabilities. So Iran's been playing this game now for a while. And Israel is also playing the game by taking them at their word and saying, yeah, we believe you. Based on what we see, based on the evidence, based on information, by the way, that Israel stole from Iran to prove to the world that they're very much working towards a development of a nuclear bomb, and proving to the world that no, Iran says they're going to make peaceful nuclear material, and Israel said, no, this is what they say they're going to do in their documents. So
right.
Israel's proven that, and so there's no game there that we're not playing too. The world's playing. It's just a question of whether we're going to play a game that Iran can win and let them win. So they are Amalek. Iran has self-identified themselves as Amalek. And so we could say that the role we have to have now is to make sure that at least the current government of Iran is destroyed. It doesn't mean every Iranian's bad. Probably most Iranians hate their government, but that doesn't matter. Right now, the government that's in charge there has sworn that they are committed to Israel's destruction. So you take them at their word. So being at war with Amalek throughout the ages, we're at war with those who would want to destroy us. And we hope that they will not be successful. That is the end of the Torah portion, Bishalach, which begins with us crossing the Sea of Reeds and ends with Amalek. So Amalek is pretty important. And at the end of the portion that talks about crossing the Sea of Reeds. That's the last words. It's also the last words of chapter 17, because we move into Yitro. And this is where we're going to finish today, chapter 18. Yitro, which, according to our tradition, is a portion that's named after Yitro. Moses, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, God's people, how Adonai had brought Israel out of the land of Egypt. So if you're thinking to yourself, well, how the heck could Amalek have heard of all the things that God had done for Israel in Egypt? Somebody heard about it. Yitro had. So word had definitely gotten out about what was going on in the land of Egypt. They had heard about Israel and how they left Egypt and all the miracles that were done there, and that God had now brought them out. And so Yitro hears about it. So there is absolutely biblical precedence for the fact that the Amalekites knew and still attacked us. They still had the audacity to attack us. So it seems pretty clear from the context that people had heard about it. And Moses' father-in-law, Yitro, we've read about before. Now this Torah portion is named after Yitro. And as we've talked about before, and as we'll talk about, because we talk about it a few times a year, 6 times a year to be precise, there's only 6 portions named after people. Yitro is one of those people. So he's given the honor of having a Torah portion named after him, which is a pretty high naming opportunity. It's not a naming opportunity that a lot of people get. 6 people get it. Now, he's also not an Israelite. He's a Midianite, as it says, which means he's a descendant of Abraham, but he's not a Hebrew. And not only is he not a Hebrew, he's a priest of Midian, which means he worships the way the Midianites worship. Now, that he worshiped God in some form? Maybe. We don't know. There's differences of opinion of how Israelite their worship was, if you will, because he is a descendant of Abraham. He could have had some concept of God, but he's definitely a Midianite, and it never says that he's not a Midianite. Every time we read about him, he's a Midianite, and he's a Kohen Midianite. That's the Hebrew word for priest. He's a Kohen Midian. He's also every time referred to as Moses' father-in-law. And he's over and over again repeated. Yes. So we have other names for him. That is absolutely true, Mike. He's referred to as Reuel earlier in the Bible. He's referred to as Reuel. He's also referred to as Hobab. He's got two different names. That's really very different names. So there's Midrash that he had different names. He had nicknames. He was known by different names. There's another possibility that there are different authors at stake at work here, and some call him Hobab, and some call him Reuel, and some call him Yitro. But
we're sure.
it's a good question. I think I'll look it up. I'm not sure that he's actually identified as a Midianite in every second. I'm not sure if Reuel is not identified as Zipporah's Zipporah's father in that, though. It's a good question. Let me see if Reuel is. I think he's. And again, we very rarely call him Reuel. Reuel literally means the shepherd of God. So he's referred to as Reuel in Exodus 2:18. In Exodus 2:18, which is the time when we're actually first. I'll show it to you. It's in a different text, but I'll show you right here. This is the first time that we meet him. He's actually called Reuel when we meet him here. In here, it says her name is Zipporah. So here it's pretty clear that it's that dude. But he's not an Israelite, but he's a very good guy. And what's so impressive about this fact that this Torah portion is named after him is that next week we're going to read the story of the giving of the Ten Commandments, which means that the portion that talks about the Ten Commandments, that we read the story and read the Ten Commandments, is named after a Midianite priest. He's also, again, a really good guy. But Moses' father-in-law is deemed worthy to have, I don't know if it's the most important portion of the Torah. We won't never want to say there's a most important portion, but the Ten Commandments are pretty important. And the fact that it's named after Yitro and that he's forever identified with us, if somebody asks us, well, where's the Ten Commandments? We never told people it's chapter 20. We didn't know that. We never called it chapter 20, but we say it's in Parshat Yitro. So we knew the Torah by its portions, and Yitro was always going to have this in his chapter, if you will. So again, there's only 6 portions that are named after people. 3 of them are Israelites, 3 of them are non-Israelites. He's one of the non-Israelites that we have a Torah portion named after. So he's one of the non-Israelites. There's 2 very good people that we say Torah portions are named after. One of them is his. He's the non-Israelite. And then the good Israelite that we have one named after is Sarah. Haye Sarah. So Sarah is a very righteous person, and Yitro is a very righteous person. We have another Torah portion that's named after a non-Israelite. His name is Noah. And he's considered a good person, but not a great person, not like Yitro. He's a good person because he listens to God, but he's not a great person because he doesn't argue for anybody to be saved on the boat besides his family. So the rabbis say he's kind of an in-between guy. And they like to point out that there's an in-between guy who has some good characteristics and some not good characteristics. And that man's name is Pinchas. That's Aaron's grandson. And he's very protective of God, and he kills people that are not worshiping God the right way or worshiping other gods. But he also seems to be a little too angry. And so he's kind of an in-between guy. And then we have a bad guy. And the bad Israelite guy that we know about, his name is Korah. And we read about him in Numbers. He leads a revolt against Moses, and he's really bad, and the ground swallows him up. So he's a really bad guy, Korah. And we have a really bad guy who's non-Israelite, whose name is Balak, who hires Balaam to curse us, and he wants us to be destroyed. And he goes crazy. Yeah, Balak. That's right. Hukat Balak, right? So you got Hukat too. But Balak is that portion. And all right, Balaam is not very good either. But the portion is not named Balaam, it's named Balak, the guy who hired him. And so the rabbis like to point out there's 6 portions named after people. 3 of them are Israelites and 3 of them are not Israelites. And there's a good person and a medium person and a bad person. And there's a good medium and a good medium and a bad person in the other group, which teaches us that there's good and bad and medium people, Jews, and there's good, bad, and medium people that are not Jews. Don't think that they're all one or the other. There's some in each. You'll find good people in our people and bad people in our people, and you'll find good people and bad people, and a lot of in-betweeners. So there's a lesson in the names, but Yitro is definitely the guy that we really like, who's non-Israelite.
Moses also given,
That's what we're going to read. We're going to read right now, Mike. 100% right. This is the story of why Yitro is a nice guy. So the first thing he does of why he's a nice guy, let's take a look, is it says, now Jethro, or so Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, again, in case you forgot from the previous line, Moses' father-in-law, but they love talking about Yitro as Moses' father-in-law, which, by the way, means that Moses married the minister's daughter. It isn't just that she was a non-Jewish lady. Her dad was a priest, a minister, if you will. But he took Zipporah, Moses' wife, after she had been sent home, and her 2 sons, one of whom was named Gershom, that is to say, I've been a stranger in a foreign land, and the other was named Eliezer, meaning the God of my father's house was my help, delivering me from the sword of Pharaoh. So he took Moses' wife and his 2 grandkids, Moses' sons, Gershom and Eliezer, and brought them back to Moses after he sent them home. The problem is we never read that. This is the first time we've ever read that. You read it. We were here. You guys have been here the last few weeks for the most part, reading Exodus with us. We never read this. We never read that they got sent home. The last time we read about them was in chapter 4. They're going to Egypt.
I always assume.
Yes.
That when he left. Where we
Midian. Yeah.
to go back to Egypt,
Uh-huh.
that he was already married and having 2 kids.
Yeah, he
And
did.
he just left them.
But that's not what he said, right?
I
We-
know that's what he said.
I know, but you remember that weird story, right?
Right.
The weird story is this story right here. The last time that we read about these guys, well, we'll just go back real quick to chapter 4. This is the last time we read about them. It says that hold it a second. Go down right here. It says, at a night encampment on the way, God encountered him and sought to kill him. And Zipporah took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin and touched it to his legs and said, your bridegroom or bride. And God let him alone. And he went to meet him, and that's it. So they were with him there. They had this weird scene.
I would assume during the plagues, he said, yeah, I'd go home.
We don't know.
I think that's-
Look, maybe they went home then. Maybe at that moment they said, you know what, maybe we're not supposed to be here anymore. Maybe after that incident. But we never have any, we don't have it. We don't have that story. We don't have the story of how they got sent home. Maybe they got sent home when they were in Egypt. Maybe Moses said, it's too dangerous for you guys to be here. Maybe Moses said, it's dangerous for me. The people are really mad at me. Maybe after the first few days when he went to Pharaoh and said, let my people go, and they said, no, we're going to make life harder for you. And then the people turned to Moses and said, you're an idiot. Get out of here. Maybe he said, you know what? Zipporah and kids, it's time for you guys to leave because I might be dead. It's possible. Makes sense, but we don't know. We don't know when they left. And not only did they leave, it says she was sent home. So it's not like he said, do you want to stay here? It's not like she had a choice in the matter. It says she was sent back. Now, that means she didn't have a choice. It's not like she left willingly or she got mad and went back. So whatever time they went back, Moses's kids, my friends, according to this, at least according to this, Moses's children were not with him, at least during part of the greatest moments of his life. They didn't get to be with their dad when he split the Red Sea. They weren't there for that miracle. They missed arguably the biggest miracle that the Jewish people ever experienced. They got to watch the movie version. In all fairness, Mike, these guys, his family, missed their dad doing God's work. Now, he's not going to stop, right? He's going to do stuff in the wilderness for the next 40 years. But in reality, it doesn't get better for Moses after this. The miracles that he performs for the Israelites kind of go downhill after this.
I wouldn't call it getting the 10 Commandments.
Getting the 10 Commandments was great, but he gets to come down with them. They get to, it's true. They get to see their dad with the 10 Commandments. He also gets to see their dad throw the commandments on the ground and loses temper with everybody. But what did they miss seeing? And did Moses care? I mean, look, we don't ask these questions probably until the modern era, where we start to think about what are the family dynamics here? What was it like for a religious leader to have his family with him or not have his family with him? What are the repercussions of having your family with you? So maybe they didn't ask that question, but we asked that question. What was life like for Moses's family? Well, we don't know, but one clue to it here is that she got sent home. So Zipporah got sent home, and that is not in the Prince of Egypt. That is not in the 10 Commandments movie. That is sad. It's problematic. I'm probably interpreting it more from my own point of view, but it's very lonely. I just had my anniversary yesterday, so I better say that. Be very lonely if I didn't have my wife. But there is a sense here that Moses
Rabbi?
didn't get to have his wife with him or didn't want to have his wife with him. Yes, Glory.
Mine has a note that says, apparently Moses sent Zipporah to her father with the news that the Lord had blessed his mission and that he was in the vicinity of Mount Sinai with Israel. So it kind of sounds like he just sent her with a message for his father.
Right? It seems like the interpretation there is that the reason that the father-in-law heard of all these things was because Zipporah went and told him that. Right? The only problem with that is there's not enough time for that to have happened. And there is a sense, again, it's conflating the two lines here, which is that he heard all that God had done for him and then sent her back. I guess that's a reading for it, or brings her back. But there does seem to be this understanding that, at least from this standpoint, and this is the way it's been usually interpreted from Jewish tradition, which is that now Yitro feels it's safe for her to come back, which implies that at some point it wasn't safe for her to be back, but be there. But that's an interpretation based on kind of what seems to happen, which is we never hear about them. From the moment that Moses comes back to Egypt, we never hear about the family. We never hear about what happens to his family while this is going on. We never hear what happens. Now you can make the argument, well, we wouldn't hear. What did you say?
We don't hear later on.
We don't hear later on what happens. We don't know anything about Moses's family. We never hear about what happens to these kids, Gershom and Eleazar. We know what happens to Aaron's kids. 2 of them die because they don't listen to God. And the other 2 become priests after him. And one of them becomes the head priest after him. And his grandson Pinchas becomes the high priest after that. And there's generations of Aaron's kids. We don't know anything about Moses's kids. We have a theory that one of his descendants, or through his kids, that some of them were Levites, and not well-behaved Levites, by the way. But the point is that we don't know anything about Moses's family. And this only thing that we have from this is that at some point they were sent home, or they were sent away. Because she was sent home. I mean, Gloria, the only problem with that understanding is why, if she was sent home with a message, why was she sent home with the message with the 2 kids too? Because if she's going back with a message, then you would think that, well, he sent his wife home to be with her father, to give her the message to, but Yitro doesn't seem to do anything other than what we think he's doing here, which is reuniting the family. And so one of the reasons why Yitro is so well regarded is because he performs one of the highest mitzvahs that we can do, which is to create shalom bayit, which is to make a family whole. So if we can, as individuals, bring peace to someone's family, it's considered a mitzvah that is like what Yitro does, which is keeps a family from falling apart, keeps a family from splitting up. Because there's an interesting question here. If Yitro doesn't come right now, what happens? I mean, I like the understanding, Glory, that he gets sent back to tell her father, but why? First of all, is the idea that he now comes and sees them at this point? Are they I mean, I guess you could say maybe they're now in the vicinity of where Yitro is. So let's go get Yitro and let's go get him. But it doesn't say anywhere here that Yitro was asked to be there. There doesn't seem to be, it seems like Yitro takes it upon himself to come there and, says to Moses, hey, here's your wife, here's your kids, here's my grandkids. And it says that Yitro, Moses' father-in-law, brought Moses' sons and wife to him in the wilderness where he was encamped at the mountain of the Lord. So, I mean, the Torah seems to be saying that Yitro reunites the family. But it begs the question, what if he didn't do that? Was Moses ever going to see his family again? Was Moses prepared never to see his family again? We don't know. I mean, I think it's at least as possible that Moses kind of said to himself, my mission in this world, my job is not to be a father. It's just not what I'm going to do. I am not going to I'm not destined to have that role. Now, it's not fair to his kids, but at the same time, you can make the argument that maybe he felt his kids would be better off staying with his wife's family, living in Midian and having a nice, calm existence than to live out in the wilderness where people are constantly saying that they want to kill me and hate me. I don't need my kids around that. It's at least as possible, right? That's what he's doing. I mean, look, if you were Martin Luther King Jr.'s kids, you get to say, hey, my father was a hero, right? But you also lost your father when you were pretty young. And he knew he was going to die. He told his family he was going to die. So does it happen? Is it an easy thing to happen for for somebody to, have to do that? You know?
Moses wasn't told yet that he won't go into.
No, he doesn't.
What?
He doesn't know.
Okay. So, what's it, had some kind of premonition to send him away,
That he,
would he either live or wasn't gonna go, and he didn't want his wife, his son to be around, sons to be around. It's just,
Because they were back by now. I mean, he was so.
well, they're out of Egypt. They've got the problems behind them, maybe they felt. But what kind of life is this? What's in store? Hey, I'll just share with you something that you need to know. Theodore Herzl, the Moses of the 1800s, right? There's Theodore Herzl. We all know about Theodore Herzl. He was 44 when he died. He basically died of working himself to death. Look what happened to his kids. I'll show you right here. His daughter Paulina suffered from mental illness and drug addiction. She died in 1930 at the age of 40 from a heroin overdose. His only son Hans was given a secular upbringing, and Herzl notably refused to allow him to be circumcised. After Herzl's early death, Hans successfully converted, became a Baptist, then a Catholic, then flirted with other Protestant denominations. He sought a personal salvation for his own religious needs and universal solution, as had his father, to Jewish suffering caused by anti-Semitism. Hans voluntarily had himself circumcised on 29th of May, 1905, which is pretty strange. He had himself circumcised right after his dad died. And then it says that Hans shot himself to death on the day of his sister's funeral. He was 39 years old. You didn't know about that, did you? That's what happened to one of the greatest heroes of modern Jewish history, the Jewish Moses, who helped bring about the modern nation of Israel. This is what he said in his suicide note. A Jew remains a Jew no matter how eagerly he may submit himself to the disciplines of his new religion, how humbly he may place the redeeming cross upon his shoulders for the sake of his former co-religionists to save them from eternal damnation. That's what he was thinking in his head. A Jew remains a Jew. I can't go on living. I have lost all trust in God. All my life I've tried to strive for the truth and must admit today at the end of the road that there is nothing but disappointment. Tonight I've said Kaddish for my parents and for myself, the last descendant of the family. There is nobody who will say Kaddish for me, who went out to find peace, who may find peace soon. My instinct has laterally gone all wrong, and I've made one of those irreparable mistakes which stamp a whole life with failure. Then it is best to scrap it. Wow. There is not one descendant of Theodore Herzl that lived to see Herzl's dream realized. Now the question of what do you do with them? Well, they took their bodies and they buried him with their father. But there was one other sister, right? There was a younger sister, Trudy. She married Richard Neumann, a man 17 years her elder. He lost his fortune in the Great Depression, burdened by the steep cost of hospitalizing Trudy, who suffered from severe bouts of depressive illness that required repeated hospitalization. Neumann's financial life was precarious. The Nazis sent Trudy and Richard to Theresienstadt concentration camp, where they died. Her body was burned. Her mother, who died in 1907, was cremated. Her ashes were lost by accident. Not one descendant of Theodore Herzl ever lived. He did, I think. He did have family. And there was a step grandson. Yeah.
The grandson.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a true story. It's a true story. Not one of them lived to see the land of Israel be established. It's just a terrible story. But I think about that when I think about Moses, Because what was Moses's family? What was Moses going to do with his kids? Was Moses going to be a good father to them? Could he be a father to them, knowing what his responsibilities were to the people? So here's what it says, and we'll finish with this right now. He sent word to Moses saying, I, your father, Yitro, am coming to you with your wife and her 2 sons. And Moses went out to meet his father-in-law. He bowed low and kissed him. Each asked after each other's welfare, and they went into the tent. And Moses then recounted to his father-in-law everything that Adonai had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, and all the hardships that had befallen them on the way, and how Adonai had delivered them. And Yitro rejoiced over all the kindness that Adonai had shown Israel when delivering them from the Egyptians. And he said, Yitro said, blessed be Adonai, who delivered you from the Egyptians and from Pharaoh, and who delivered you from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that Adonai is greater than all the gods, yes, by the result of their very schemes against the people. So it says very clearly here that Yitro is very impressed by what happens, and he seems to become at least a follower of God here by saying that God is at least better than all the gods,
Or your God
is the best.
God.
Yes, so maybe he doesn't fully get it. So he gets something, but he doesn't get the whole thing, which is maybe why he's still a Midianite. He still doesn't get it. There is no other God. But he says Adonai is greater, and he says, blessed be Adonai, right? Baruch Adonai. Best he can do, exactly. It's the best he can do. Being a Midianite priest his whole life, this is the best he can do, right? And Jethro's father-in-law, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and sacrifices for God, and Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to partake of the meal before God with Moses' father-in-law. And here it says he brought offerings. Now it says that Aaron came and took part in it, but it doesn't seem like Aaron actually offered the sacrifices. It seems like Yitro did it. It doesn't say, yes, it doesn't say that he brought them and then Aaron offered them up. It says that he took part in them. So it seems as though Aaron is helping here, acknowledging it, is part of it, but it is Yitro that is making these sacrifices. So not only does he bless God, not only does he acknowledge God, but he actually makes sacrifices to God. So this is a very special moment that at least is recognition that Yitro is saying. Now, I will tell you, because we're going to finish up now, we know nothing about what happens with the family reuniting.
Mm-mm.
All of this is about Yitro. None of this is about Tzipporah. None of this is about what the kids do. It's all about Yitro. You're not missing anything. It's not here. I didn't skip it. It's not coming up. It's not here. The next day, Moses, and this is the part we're going to finish with right now. And this is where Mike, again, remembers this part.
Right.
Now, remember, Yitro did something very special by reuniting the family. But of course, this is where we say that Moses, where Yitro is even, again, given the special honor. The next day, Moses sat as a magistrate among the people, while the people stood about Moses from morning until evening. But when Moses' father-in-law saw how much he had to do for the people, he said, what is this thing that you're doing to the people? Why do you act alone when all the other people stand about you from morning until evening? Moses replied to his father-in-law, it's because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, it comes before me, and I decide between one party and another, and I make known the laws and teachings of God. So he says to him, I have to. Who else is going to help the people? I have to help settle the disputes. And again, this is the word judge. We talked about this word before, shofet, right?
Mhm.
I am the shofet. I am the judge between men, between people, one party and another. And Moses' father-in-law said to him, the thing you are doing is not right. This is lo tov. This is not good. You will surely wear yourself out. and the people as well. For the task is too heavy for you. You cannot do it alone. Now listen to me. I will give you counsel, and God will be with you. You represent the people before God, and bring the disputes before God, and enjoin upon them the laws and teachings, and make known to them the way to go and the practices they are to follow. You shall seek out from among the people capable individuals who fear God, trustworthy ones who spurn ill-gotten gain. Set these over them as chiefs of thousands, hundreds, fifties, tens, and let them judge the people at all times. Have them bring every major dispute to you, but let them decide every minor dispute themselves. Make it easier for yourself by letting them share the burden with you. And so, of course, Yitro teaches them to delegate and to share the burden. Exactly. Create small claims courts, create smaller courts, and let them move up if they're tough. And you settle the toughest ones, but let these people have a way of bringing their disputes to lower courts first and share the burden, right? And he says it's not fair to you. You're going to get worn out. You can't do this. And on top of it, it's not fair to them. It's going to tire them out because they're going to have to wait for you and they're going to get tired. And it's not good. Now, it of course shows that people are already having disputes among themselves, of course. That's going to happen in every community. If you do this and God so commands you, you'll be able to bear up. And all these people too will go home unwearied. And Moses heeded his father-in-law and did just as he said. Moses chose capable individuals out of all Israel and appointed them over the heads of the people. And they judged the people at all times. The difficult matters they would bring to Moses, and all the minor matters they would decide themselves. And so they followed Moses's Yitro's wise decision, and this is what they did. They set up a court. Now, of course, all of this presupposes that they knew what the law was, which they don't. Because the last line says, and Moses bade his father-in-law farewell, and he went on his way to his own land. So Yitro didn't decide, I'm going to move in with you guys. He goes back. Now it says that he goes back by himself. So the family does not go back with Yitro, or at least it doesn't say that. It says he went on his way, which is the singular. It doesn't say, it would say, and they went on their way back. But he went back to his homeland. He went back to his land. So he gives Moses this wonderful, wonderful lesson, which leads us to Mount Sinai. And so now we're going to get the law. Now, I will tell you that the story, the way the story is set up, the way it's listed, now they're back at Rephidim, and they're at the foot of the mountain. And this is now Moses getting the 10 Commandments. But from what we just read, and what, again, we'll pick up next week in chapter 19, is that Moses needs the people to know the rules so that before they even come to court, they know what the rules are. So the Torah is going to give them now a chance to know what the rules are before they even have to come to court. Because it's great that they come to court to settle disputes, to know, again, once they have a problem, but they really need to know how to live their lives so they don't have to come to court. Because nobody should have to come to court to learn the law. You have to come to court to enforce the law, but you don't come to court to learn the law. And so this is the next step, or essentially the most important step, which is giving people a chance to know what the laws are ahead of time. So you can make the argument they should have had that first. Before they have a court, they should have the laws. But in this case, who had laws back then? Not anybody we know of. The Jewish people will be the first people in history that are bound together as a people, not by a king and not by a land, but by laws, but by rules, which is why we can survive without a land, why we can survive without almost everything, because we have the rules. And that's what we're going to read next week. We're going to read chapters 19 and 20, which is being at Mount Sinai. So this is all the prelude. This is all how we got there. But you can see that now they'll have a chance to get the rules. So we look forward to that next week. We're going to read chapter 19, which is how they got ready for it. And then chapter 20, we'll actually read the 10 Commandments. So that's what we'll be doing next week. So Tracy, my wife, is doing much better. She's hopefully going to be able to, she's been working the last couple of days at home, but she had surgery. For those that didn't hear last week, she had surgery she had it Wednesday, but it seems like it was a long time ago, but she only had it last Wednesday, but she had some sinus surgery and some surgery to help her breathe better, especially at night, which is another way of saying to stop her from snoring. But it was my anniversary last night, so I don't want to make fun of her. And
You did enough of that Friday night.
I did enough of that Friday night, but she wasn't at services, so I could do that. I sent her home, just like Moses, told her to go home. The only thing is, if I sent her back to England, my father-in-law would not bring her back. I can tell you that. He would not do that. I would say, I'd be waiting a long time to have her be brought back.
You keep
But
her.
that'll never happen. I promise. Don't worry. She's not going, but she is going to Orange County tomorrow to work. So she's feeling well enough to go back to work. But thanks for asking. And hopefully,
And how's she breathing now?
how's she breathing is not gone into effect yet, Joyce.
Oh,
All I
all
can
right.
say
So
is
you were
I
waiting
slept
for
last night.
results.
I slept last night. It's not, I mean, it's really, yeah, I slept last night in my bed, but it was only because I was really, really tired. Oh, but wait, the funniest thing was last night, she couldn't sleep. She recorded me snoring, and she sent it to the kids, and she said, and I had to get surgery. But
Oh my God, you guys are
She
wonderful.
sleeps very soundly. She sleeps from my snoring. I can't, if I wake up in the middle of the night and she's snoring, I can't go back to sleep. So I have to leave. But she normally sleeps pretty well throughout the night, but she was in pain and she did wake up. But yes,
Send her our love, please.
thank you. Yeah, deviated septum. Yeah, she had the turbinate. She had her deviated septum done, but this was turbinates that needed to be shaved back. And she had the back of her throat shaved back, the uvula,
Oh.
which the doctor said she had to have done if she needed to stop snoring. But he told her, you don't have to have it done. And so I got blamed for having this surgery. She said the surgery was only for me. So I don't know. It better work. And I hope she feels better soon, because she says that was my anniversary. That was my
Better
anniversary.
start showing gratitude and
Was her surgery.
appreciation.
Well, I know, but I can't. Joyce, I mean, I can't. I literally go like 9 times out of 10. I go into another room because I can't sleep with it. But it's hopefully it's over. But I don't want to complain. It's not. I don't want to complain. I don't want to complain about it because she's a very nice lady, but she's
God bless you.
Oh,
Thank you for a wonderful class.
Yeah, thank you, Joyce. By the way, is that you can't really put that in the contract, right? No snoring. Can't really put that in the contract. yeah. It doesn't go in a contract, right, Joyce?
It doesn't,
Yeah,
but
you
it
can't
can
do
be negotiated in the contract.
Can't be. It's not her fault. She can't do it.
That's right.
All right, guys. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mary.
Love you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank
Love
you
you,
so
Joyce.
much.
Now she
Good
can
seeing
hear that.
all of you. I love seeing you.
Bye.
Love you too.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.